Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal-Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah. Okay. Just playing with the power plug behind us there. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each week, I host eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This week, we are broadcasting from Croke Park in Dublin, where we are at Ireland's Legal Tech Conference 2022. This is our third and final podcast of the day. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest now is Lee Morrissey. Lee is Managing Director, Managed Legal Services at Johnson Hana. Lee, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me, George.
So before we jump into details, tell us a little more about who you are, what you do, and the organization you work for.
Very good. So I'm working with Johnson Hana about 3 years now. Johnson Hana is Ireland's first alternative legal service provider. So founded in 2017 by Dan Fox and Alex Fox, brothers. So I suppose they'd seen an opportunity within the Irish market to...
So I got to ask, two Fox brothers and they call it Johnson Hana?
Johnson Hana, exactly.
How does that happen?
I know, it's an interesting story. So Johnson Hana is the Fox's mother's maiden name. And then Hana is, I believe, a forest in Hawaii where Dan spent some time at some point. And I'm sure if you ask him after a few pints, he'll tell you that, maybe it's where he kind of came up with the idea of disaggregating legal services. But I think we'll leave him tell that story.
Yes, I think so.
So I suppose really the kind of idea there was that they saw an opportunity to, provide a different way of doing some of the legal services within the Irish market. So while, law firms do very well at providing the advisory side of things, there's kind of an opportunity, I suppose, to bring best practices from outside of the legal sphere into the more process-based work. So what we always talk about in Johnson Hana is we kind of have three main pillars. So one is our expert lawyers, consultants who've seen kind of a more flexible way of working, and they're eager to, I suppose, work in a different way, a more flexible way than we would have seen previously. The second part is the best-in-class technology. So we like to say that we're tech agnostic, but we're very well connected within the legal tech kind of sphere or ecosystem. So, for example, we have very strong links with Reveal, who we always like to bring in on those kind of eDiscovery, like we're talking about today, or even SARS, freedom of information requests, access to information on the environment. So any kind of large-scale document reviews, that technology side is something that we really do leverage and lean on heavily. Then the third side of it, and probably the part that's close to my own heart, is the project management. So I wouldn't have come from a legal background. Originally, I was in technology consulting for Accenture, so large-scale kind of organizational transformation, where I really would have been involved in kind of the program delivery side of things. So originally, back in the day, quite a while ago now, I would have studied law at undergrad level, decided to go a separate path, but then circled back in the end. So when I saw Johnson Hana looking for kind of somebody with a project management focus who could bring some level of understanding of the law, I said, right, get me in there. I'm eager to see where this journey goes. So that's where we are, Johnson Hana.
And I take it it's been a good journey, or you would not be talking with me today,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah, 3 years. I think I've decided now that it's the place to be. So
Good.
The company's done very well over that time as well. I suppose we've just closed off our second fundraise now. So
Nice.
AIB, the largest bank in Ireland, has come on as the lead investor for that round. So we're now, I suppose, like on this next stage of the growth journey, right? We're just looking to kind of double down on what we've been doing so far in the Irish market and also look abroad. So one thing we're very fortunate here in Dublin in particular is that we have a lot of the multinationals working here, especially in the tech industry.
Well, it's long been a tech center.
Exactly, right. I mean, you have the Silicon Docks and everything. So what we're looking at there really, I suppose, is where we've really kind of sold the value proposition that we can bring, of our three unique selling points. We can bring that now to other geographies and other jurisdictions for some of our clients, and they're really seeing the value of that already. Earlier on in the summer, we actually had a request from one particular client to provide a lawyer down in South Africa. That's something that we hadn't done previously, but I guess
experience.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. And really, it's this thing of, because it's process based. It's something really that we're not so limited by borders, right? We can provide support to our clients across the world. So that's something we leverage on heavily.
One of the topics in our lengthy discussions ahead of time that you said that is of a special interest to you is delivery methodologies. So what do you mean by that, and why do you care about that?
Yeah, so I suppose this is really, taking some of the structures which are already in place for discovery. So obviously, I know you're very familiar and acquainted with EDRM, for example.
Heard about it.
Just about, yeah. So it's taking that and then aligning it with some of the project management methodologies that have come from outside of the legal industry. So, for example, leaving the eDiscovery aside for a minute, one thing that we'd be borrowing heavily from is kind of the agile methodologies. So quite often, in software development, for example, it's obviously been a big trend over the recent while. We're taking some of the best and the leading practices from that and bringing them into the legal space.
So what are some of the examples of what you're bringing over there?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the big things is organizing work in terms of sprints or shorter iterative work. So one thing we're able to do there is we're able to prototype quite easily, where a client maybe has a complex project which they are not really clear on how they could successfully outsource to us. We are able to come in, say, right, we feel like, this multi-year program of work that you're looking at is definitely something we can do. We can do it more efficiently and to an acceptable quality, and while delivering cost savings, for example, compared to traditional ways of doing it, or freeing up our internal resources. But we just want to validate to you that we can do it exactly the way you want it. So what we'll do is we'll say, let's take a subset of your contracts which are for review, your land which needs registration with the property registration authority in Ireland, which is, I suppose, an antiquated system. We'll take a small subset of that, prototype it, look back at the end of it, make sure you're happy with everything that works. We'll fine tune the methodology, and then we'll go all in on it. We'll put the right resources in place, and we'll deliver through this multi-year program. So that's one thing. And
now, all of that is not one sprint, no?
Exactly. No, not at all. But I think one sprint is enough really to, prove the concept for the client, allow them like a tangible deliverable. And I suppose one of the core kind of principles or advantages of agile delivery models in particular is that you're looking at delivering value for the client early on. So, for example, to throw it back to that eDiscovery kind of side of things, it's like, providing early case assessment, for example, right? You're unlocking that value from day one. You're not saying it's a 3-year project. You'll get the end result in 3 years. Don't bother me during that time. Exactly.
Okay.
Instead, we're saying we're going to be delivering what you can do as you go along. For example, I suppose one thing that we've worked on quite extensively recently is the standard contractual clauses, so repapering on the GDPR kind of space. And one thing quite often that we can do early days for the clients there is they've got their contract book. They don't have full awareness of maybe what's in there. We obviously need to get a better insight and intelligence there before we can get into it. So when we do a bit of AI-enabled contract review early on, we can fill the gaps in their awareness of their contracts. So we can say, look, here's all your renewal dates. Now you have something in a kind of a tabular or more structured format than you had previously. That obviously has uses outside of this project. We can unlock that kind of value as we go along while still working towards the end goal or the end result for the client.
So you're taking it in small bites instead of trying to bite it all
Exactly.
off. And you're swallowing little bit by little bit instead of everything. And the metaphor is going to fall apart.
We ran with it long enough, though.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the big changes of focus that we have. And then I think the other thing really is that because we're bringing this kind of process mindset, and we're bringing a lot of people quite often who are from outside of the legal sphere and marrying them with the in-house experts and subject matter experts we're able just to drive more kind of process discipline, I suppose, in terms of things. So we're talking about right resources for the right work. We're looking at making sure the processes are repeatable and they're efficient. So one thing that we probably use a word more than we should, playbooking. We always make sure that anything that we do, if we're going to do it once, it's noted down for the client. It's a repeatable process.
Right.
We can use a junior resource to reiterate this over and over again. And we've also got the checks and balances in terms of quality that can really ensure that it stands up to, the standards and the quality that the client expects from us.
Tie this all back into what happens in an eDiscovery
Absolutely.
What does that look like when you bring this methodology to bear there?
Yeah, so I suppose on the eDiscovery side of things, quite early on in the process, we're actually looking at, things like, say, refining searches, for example. That's something that we'll quite often do in a very, very quick series of iterations. We'll be collaborative with the client as well from that point of view. Quite often, we're trying to provide real-time feedback on what this is doing to affect their counts of the data population. And we're also trying to tie that, I suppose, to timelines as well for them, so that we're able to say, okay, this is the population that we're looking at now. This is the review team that we've agreed. They're ready to go. This is how long we can complete it by. Obviously, we know the deadlines that we're working to. Do we need to flex the team? Do we think we need to revisit search terms? Do we need to bring counsel in again to revisit this and see, do we have any more room? What else would be palatable? So we're trying to make sure that early days we can actually iterate this process with the client so that we're starting on the right foot. We're getting things done early on so that we can just run the process from there out.
I think our discussion about delivery methodology has morphed over into one about project management.
Exactly, yeah. So I suppose really on the project management side, one thing that we pride ourselves on again is kind of transparency for the client. So, we'd often use, I suppose, a level of reporting that maybe wouldn't be seen from a traditional provider of legal services. So that's things like burn down charts, showing kind of the progress through the review and being able to see the sticking points which have slowed down our review rates. Is it a population of data maybe which is proving particularly dense or slow for our reviewers to go through? And then it's really on that project manager to deep dive in, in software development, you call it root cause analysis. So you're looking at what's actually causing this slowdown, how can we get to the bottom of it? And quite often, that's where we'll lean on colleagues in places like Reveal, for example, to bring in maybe the best in class in the AI side of things. Is there AI models that we can use here? Can we start clearing out some legal privilege maybe that we're seeing that should have been spotted earlier? Are we maybe able to, separate data if we see review rate spike, for example? Maybe that means that the data isn't worth review. So we want to look at, identifying things like social media posts, out of offices, sports news, personal emails, getting all of that segregated off as well and taking care of that. So, we aren't burning hours.
How much use do you make of reusable AI models?
Yeah, so we found that the ones prepackaged on Reveal are actually very good. So, even the ones I've mentioned around kind of data cleaning, I suppose, definitely a big win for us. And then outside of that, it's it's really building out our own from there. So that's something.
How's that going for you?
Yeah, it's something that we've started on. Obviously, it's always a process, it's a journey.
Of course.
Yeah. We're very lucky to have, I suppose, a skill team in-house who do have that in-depth, eDiscovery and even
makes a big difference.
Exactly, yeah. So, for example, we've a fantastic project manager on my team, Tanya Kidney, who would have actually worked with Reveal previously. So your loss was her gain on this one. But she's absolutely fantastic in the detail in that, and really, I suppose, those reusable resources that we've got now. It's fantastic and something we're really looking to build on in the future, especially when we move into, I suppose, Reveal 11 and the next step of it. It's just something that I really want to see unfold and I'm very excited about.
You've got at least two divisions in the organization, right? Managed legal services and then legal solutions.
Exactly. So
describe, compare, contrast.
Two sides of the one coin, I suppose. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about project management on this call, or maybe we have already. But
we can keep going.
It would be the height of arrogance, though, for me to say that's the answer.
This is hosted by ACEDS. Mike Corderero, if you know him at all, is all about project management.
Fantastic. Amongst friends.
So if he's listening, he wants to hear everything you have to say
Very
about
good.
Project management.
But I suppose the other side of it is, the legal expertise that we touched on earlier on. And that's where, the sister team of mine, Legal Solutions within the organization, where they come into play. That's our expert in-house lawyers. We call them legal architects quite often because they're involved in the process architecture early on in any kind of engagement with a client. They're the ones who'll be heavily involved in making sure that the legal requirements are captured, that we're doing things to best practices, that we're making sure that our process actually meets the end requirement. So that team's headed up by Sinead Garnett, who's actually speaking here today. So look forward to popping into that later on, where they're talking about embracing AI, I think, in legal technology. So Sinead and her team really my team lean heavily on them. to provide the legal context where we're lacking in that, and to make sure that we're doing things up to scratch.
And then her team leans heavily on you as well, I take it.
Exactly, yeah. We keep them on track, I suppose, in terms of the repeatability of processes, and they make sure that we're respecting the subject matter itself. So it's a nice kind of double act that we've got going on there.
So on the managed legal services side, which is Sinead's part,
managed legal services is my team.
is your team.
And,
Okay,
yeah,
I've got to keep them separate. So she's the legal solutions side.
exactly.
You are the managed legal services side. So then on your side,
Yep.
what additional things are you doing?
Yeah, so I suppose from our side, it's, making sure that we're driving that process discipline. So it's all well and good making sure that, we're doing things correctly, I suppose, in the once-off or in the single case. But we're thinking, how can we repeat this? How can I make sure that my team don't have to go back to Sinead again to ask the same question? Or to make sure that our consultants don't have to send these emails to ask the questions. So we're the ones involved in building out the playbooks, the wikis, the process maps, and even putting in things like dedicated check-ins with the legal solutions team to provide quality assurance. So we like to have all that planned out from day one in the process, right? To make sure that Sinead and her team can go on and do the deep thinking that they're experts at.
Right.
And we can free them up to do that. So we use them quite a bit, but we respect their time. We try to make sure that as the project goes on, their requirement for input drops off more and more, except for the dedicated check-ins.
As you think about what you want to make as a repeatable process, do you have any measure that you use to determine that, such as if we've done it 3 times, we're going to make it a repeatable process, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I suppose one thing that we lean on heavily there is really, the kind of entrepreneurial nature that everybody brings to the organization. It's something I absolutely love about working in Johnson Hana, is the variety of people that we have. Coming from a consulting background, everybody be very, very, I suppose, of the one mindset, driven, want to get it done, want to move quickly, break things along the way. And obviously that's fantastic. It's fun, but it's nice to have some balance in that. I think working with lawyers is a fantastic way to smooth those edges and make sure that we're getting the most of both flip sides of the coin, aren't they? So it's just so good to work in an organization where we have both represented well. And I think the fact that everybody is so eager in the company and, there's this, I suppose, intellectual back and forth almost, which really kind of sparks the creativity. We can really rely on our teams to actually say, this isn't working or this is inefficient. This is something that we need to address. And that goes from the most junior members of my team all the way up to the top. And it's something that really, I think, that's what's rewarding at the end of the day. Churning through documents and seeing a number drop down is nice. But I think really, exactly, knowing that we won't be doing the same thing tomorrow is something that's very rewarding for everybody.
So looking into the future, whether it's short-term, medium-term, long-term, you choose. Where do you see things headed?
For the company? Or
You choose for the company, for the industry.
Very good. So I suppose for the company first, really it's perfecting what we're doing at the moment. So everything is working well, but internally we just want to make sure everything is fine-tuned for the next stage of the journey. I kind of touched on it earlier on, but that international element is another thing that we're looking at heavily, especially now since the last fundraise. So being able to bring the benefits that we're seeing within this country into, for example, the technology space in the US and San Francisco, into London as well, where there's a lot of offices of our clients. So bringing that in. Embedding, I suppose, the value of our organization in some of the industries which are slower to change. So, for example, we've been very successful on kind of the state and semi-state frameworks, getting legal process framework put in place, winning tenders there, and actually getting set up where we're able to quickly provide these services to clients in that sector. So that's something we want to see more of. We want to make sure that everybody's free to avail of our services and it's as painless as possible to onboard us because we know it's a better way. That, I suppose, also is something where we work a lot directly with clients, but we also work with law firms where it's required, where, they're saying we really want to focus on, case strategy. We want to advise our clients and we want somebody else to do some of the heavy lifting. That's something that we're always happy to do, right? We're friends of everybody in this industry, so we're happy to jump in and get the hands dirty where required.
This is going to be an unfair question. You can avoid answering it if you choose. And we know all our children are equally favorite children, but which group of clients do you prefer working with? Which type of clients? Not individual organization names, but
Yeah, so I suppose from my point of view, that's a very hard question, isn't it? I'm like, I'll be on calls with these people tomorrow.
It's an unfair question too. So you can just take a pass on that, and we can.
I think I'll dip the toe in the water. I won't go all the way in. I suppose really from my point of view, it is the semi-states, which I really like. I think quite often there, people are hungry for change. They really want to see a better way of doing things, and they're very thankful, I suppose, when we're able to say, "This is how you're doing things before. This is what we can do different for you." It's a long road quite often, like I touched on, to actually get onboarded with these clients. But once it's up and running, I think everybody sees the value, and it's something we find very rewarding, I suppose, to deliver.
You are expanding internationally. Are you expanding in other ways?
Yeah, so I suppose we're always reviewing what we can provide for clients. So eDiscovery obviously was something that we began with as a company. It was one of the early products that we offered. From there, other, I suppose, document review type work that we've been doing, and we rely heavily on Reveal again as a platform for that. So data subject access requests, obviously GDPR, since its induction, has become, quite a driver of effort within organizations. And it's an area really where, people want to free up their resources to focus on more strategic or more value add tasks. So that's something which we've seen huge growth on over the last while. And it's something that we can provide, I suppose, a range of different services for. So everything from your very high sensitivity or large volume or once off access request, maybe something employment related, pre-litigation, in some other way sensitive, where you want the best people to be looking at it. And that's where we can bring in consultants who are legally qualified professionals, that are going to bring that level of rigor to their review. And they're going to treat it almost like a discovery, right? It's going to be reviewed to the same standard. We'll have the same QA type process in place. Typically, maybe there might not be that first line, second line review, but there will be a structured quality program. So that's one area that we can bring it to. Also repeatable kind of access requests. So where you just want to free up your privacy or your legal department completely, and you don't want them bogged down in these regular requests. So again,
because they can be very time consuming.
Completely. Right? And I suppose also, it's not the best for morale within the department, right? To be sitting down to start redacting again.
Right.
Not going to win
no
your friends.
Favorite activity.
No, not at all. So it's something that we're very happy to kind of take on for clients. Again, playbook at the start. The next time you get one, you're picking up the phone to us and we're ready to go within a day. We can spin up our teams very quickly, organize data to come across and get that done. So that's, I suppose, been a big growth area for us in the last while. And again, something that we've, been able to work closely with yourselves and Reveal on. Spinning on from that, again, you've got your freedom of information requests within the government departments and semi-states, and also the AIEs, which are access to information on environment, very similar to a freedom of information request. And again, methodology and delivery wise, very similar to any of those document review projects. And then I suppose
once you build one structure, you can modify it.
Exactly.
Redirect it, modify and redirect again.
That's it. You're not starting from the blank page, right? You're able to take your learnings from previous, take your models, in terms of your forecasting, your resourcing, everything else, and deploy it to a new area. And I suppose hit the ground running, bring those values to the client from day one. So outside the review space then, we're also doing a lot of work in, I suppose, contract lifecycle management, in contract review, in repapering. So that's been a big growth area for us again over the last year or so, driven a lot by the SECs and the changes there. So that's something that we're still seeing clients reach out looking for help with. I suppose it's something which has caught some people on the back foot, regulatory change and everything else. So we're always happy to help out there.
With SARS, which are, of course, much more common here, much less well-known in the United States.
Absolutely.
I'm beginning to appreciate that a DSAR activity isn't necessarily something that you begin and are done with. It can then be the gateway to other events or activities, right?
Exactly.
Explain.
So I suppose that's one thing, that the threshold for a DSAR is essentially nil. You're entitled to access for your own data or of your own data. So it's something that quite often we can do on, an inquisitive basis by a data subject. So they can be reaching out on, I suppose, what some might call a phishing exercise and looking really to just see what's out there. So that's something that we would always advise clients on, that, really just approach it with the level of respect that it deserves. Make sure that this isn't seen as purely an administrative function, that you actually want to bring a level of rigor and discipline and care to it. So you're making sure that you're releasing these documents exactly as appropriately. And from that point of view, then, I suppose one other benefit that we can bring is when an ACEDS request is actually processed through. And like you said, the release of documents, the production of documents is never really the end point to these. What you can do from there is, obviously, data is on the system. We're able very easily to address follow-up requests, to retrieve from archives, to provide support if it came to it from the regulator, for example. And also, if things were to go down a litigious route, we'd be able to, again, get the head start on some of the discovery. Data has been gathered, and it's something that you can spin a team up on while you complete your, I suppose, more rigorous data gathering, which might be out there.
Okay, well, I think I am going to draw this to a close now.
Very good.
Thank you very much for stopping by. Lee Morrissey is Managing Director, Managed Legal Services at Johnson Hana. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Lee, thank you very much.
George, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.